Time 100 photo, right? Yes. No, but all seriousness, we're going to have a really fun conversation. Before I get started, I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name is Ash Kumra. I head up programming for AI Collective. We are one of the largest AI membership groups in the world. We got over 100 chapters, 80,000 members. We're a nonprofit, so I don't feel shameless plugging ourselves right here. But if you're interested in AI Collective, you want to get involved in the AI revolution, we do events all around the world. Just hit me up, ash@aicollective.com, or come talk to me after. But let's talk about the man of the hour. This man here is the inventor of the hashtag. And he's so confident about it that if you go to his website, he actually has a link that says Google it. So he's a man that stands by that. So he really is the man who brought the hashtag, and which has changed our lives. He's also probably the top product hunt picker. He has built a whole business around this. Yeah. Thank you. And he's an investor. He has a really good eye for design. He's just someone who understands where the trends are going. And so speaking of trends, I kind of wanted to have that conversation with you. So as someone who has built and seen this social media revolution over 20 plus years ago, let's talk about how we can translate that. Is there a similar movement happening now? Like if you were inventing something right now that had that same vibe of the hashtag, what is that in your opinion?
Well, hello everybody. I'm super excited to be here. We are in the 420 spot, and so we might get a little heady. We are at the midway, for what it's worth. I'm wearing, what is this? I don't know, birds. Yeah, you know, it's both. It's a challenging question because 20 years ago, when we were starting out building social media, we didn't have words to describe a lot of what we were doing, and most people thought that we were pretty stupid for sharing our breakfasts, you know, on this new platform called Twitter. And yet, there was this sense that what we were engaged in was the start of some new medium, some new shift in the way that people connected and communicated, and documenting that amongst and for ourselves was the way by which we would actually bring people onto the platform and give them the same tools or ability to communicate and connect with each other without gatekeepers. So we find ourselves in this very strange place. We've had an entire day full of talks about new entities that are joining into humanity. Well, I should say there's a separation there, but like joining into the spaces in which we have shared mostly with other human types, and we're learning how to communicate with them. So if I were to sort of step back, I don't know that there's going to be like another hashtag for like the era of AI per se, but I think it's really valuable to understand that the moment that we're in is the great before, and we're about to enter into a great after. And what I mean by that is from actually 20 years ago, 2 days ago, I helped to organize the very first bar camp down in Palo Alto. That event was a fork of Tim O'Reilly's event called Foo Camp, and I bring that up because the very first hashtag that I used was for bar camp. And so it's been a 20-year journey to get to this point. And so 2 years prior to me coming up with my proposal for the hashtag, which Twitter infamously thought was a stupid idea that would never work, you know, we were starting to figure out how this new medium, these new phones that people were starting to get, would be useful for many, many more people that thought it used to be just a place for nerds. So we're in a similar place where people in this room are building agents, they're building AI prompting engines. Who knows? It's a new vernacular. It's a new way for people to communicate their ideas with computers and then to get something back that's quite reasonable, where you can remove the human frailty out of that equation. And so what it seems to me is happening is we're moving from a world where generative AI and LLMs are a kind of tool, just as the social network was before, into a world where we're producing a new medium. So once the social network became a medium for expression, once Zuck flipped the script and took the social network and put it to the background and put the feed in the front, that gave people a new way to express, to share, and to connect. And so in a very similar way, I see that where we're moving to with generative AI is going to equip a whole new generation of people in the ability to communicate their ideas and to build them in a way that was not economical before. And I say this because I'm not a developer. I'm trained as a designer. And I've spent the last 20 years trying to convince and cajole engineers who are lazy as fuck to build the shit that I want them to build, and they tell me no, 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 no. And so why do you think the hashtag worked? Was because it was like the simplest possible thing that I could get these developers to actually implement in their products. Now I don't have to go to those developers anymore. I can build this shit myself. So we are on the verge of moving from a world where it's all about technology and about SaaS and about normalizing all of the use cases that people have for software and building whatever kind of bespoke, ridiculous, uneconomic ideas you might have, which brings us into the world of taste and culture and entertainment and expression.
I love that. And along those lines about, I heard a couple things. One thing I heard from you is there's now this democratization of being able to build products because of what generative AI has been able to do. And I find this title interesting. So our title is Coding the Vibe, because we met at a vibe coding event. We actually met at a hackathon contest. And I know actually one of the groups who presented there, they're actually in the front. You should check these guys out. They're 18 years old. They're going to be trillionaires one day. Get to know them. But anyways, on a serious note.
Well, and specifically, this hackathon was called Outside LLMs.
Yeah.
So you get the vibe of what this was for.
Yeah, exactly. And so my question to you is, let's talk about vibe coding for a sec, because that's the theme of this. We met at a vibe coding inspired event. How does vibe coding fit in this? And the reason why I want you to answer this, just to give context, is because there might be people in this room who might feel like they lack the tools, they might lack the funding. I know funding is a big thing, or they might lack some technical prowess, or they might not have as strong design chops as you have. But I feel like vibe coding could start the process, at least build that prototype, at least build that first iteration to maybe build a team or build something. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, going to this hackathon, like, what I find strange about myself, like, since I'm not quite good at anything, but I have a bunch of different interests, it's like I sit at the seam of so many different disciplines and areas where people like know things deeply. And what I see and find is like these waves are sort of like crashing, or these tectonic plates are overlapping into a way that creates sort of unintuitive outcomes. Let me explain what I mean. I've spent the last 5 to 7 years helping founders mostly launch on Product Hunt, or I've become a VC. So I evaluate a lot of ideas for their commercial probability of success. And then we put money in, we make some bets, and then we hope, and we encourage them along the way. But going to this Outside LLMs hackathon, which was in concert, quite literally, with Outside Lands, was about building music platforms or startups or just products. The things that people were able to build in 2 to 3 hours would have taken months 5 or 6 years ago. It was insane. So the disposability of software means that whatever moat you think you're building with the software that you've been spending months or even years building has now suddenly eroded. This is like a tsunami wave that's going to wipe out a lot of things, and people that don't have any bathing systems, I'm not going to go down that path. Anyways, so I think that the skills that are necessary to operate in this new environment are quite different than what they've been before. The things that teams optimize for are going to require a different set of priorities to know whether, I think the point about the network or the community was really good. It's like, who's using this product or set of products? More importantly, how are people building or thinking about platforms? Because platforms allow for a set of, let's say, common functions or needs to be socialized across a large group, and then that group can then actually build bespoke solutions to each of their own needs. Let me give you an explanation or an example. And this is sort of like more my personal journey, which maybe will relate to some of you. Okay, so like I started using a launcher on the Mac, to date myself, in 2003 called Quicksilver. Quicksilver essentially was I don't think Spotlight even existed. That's how far back this was. Quicksilver ended up actually being created by the guy that ended up designing Google.com, if you get a sense for like where that went to. And after that, I started using a platform called Alfred. Does anybody use Alfred? You guys know what that is?
Yeah.
2 of you? Okay, thank you. 3. Okay, 2.5 of you. Okay, that's fine. More recently, in the last several years, I started using something called Raycast. Has anybody used Raycast? The same 2 people. God damn it. Okay, well, you guys, it's fine. You guys are not into productivity. I do not understand this audience, but it's fine. So the point, though, is that Raycast has built this platform that allows you to take your own specific needs for software and to write an extension. And that extension allows you to basically do what developers and programmers have done for a very long time, where, yes, developers are very lazy, but they're lazy in the sense that they will spend an inordinate amount of time automating their own needs or repetitive work. That is now possible for non-developers and non-engineers. I hang out with ChatGPT or GPT-5 actually in Warp or Windsurf, and I have the thing write an extension for me that automates my work in a way that I would have had to, again, be downstream of engineers. And so that's creating a whole new way for me to solve my own needs and experiences, then to socialize my learnings by creating these open source extensions for other people to build upon.
Okay. So this is a surprise question, but I feel like you can roll with this because I told you offline that we're gonna go with the flow, and
we're going to the vibe.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you said you sit at the intersection of all these different interests. Do you think it's important for builders and people building networks and connected communities to get outside inspiration? So for instance, if you're wanting to build a product like something that enable like another LLM or some type of agentic AI product, yes, you should read xai.com or all these different AI platforms. But is there some you have this really interesting way of looking at the world? Is it because you introduce yourself to things that are outside of AI to help you? And how does someone develop that if so?
It's an interesting question. I think I want to unpack as a way to kind of get at your question, maybe to unpack what I was saying before about mediums, because it's a very subtle but profound point. The way that I kind of think about this, and the example that I like to use, so there's two things that I think I'm relying on to understand where software is going. One is that I'll try to make this connect because it makes sense to me, but it might not make sense to you guys. When I was in college, I mostly drank gin. I had no idea how to drink. It was just like the thing that seemed obvious, and I would go for the effect. Then when I got out here, I went to Bourbon and Branch in downtown San Francisco, and I took a bartending course. And suddenly I discovered that there were all these different gins that had all these different flavors and all these subtleties and nuances based on what was put into them. Now, you don't have to be a drinker to understand what I'm talking about. The point was that I expanded myself beyond what I thought something was. I used to think that gin was or alcohol was gasoline. You just put it in the tank and fun things would happen. Terrible metaphor. There's a party afterwards. You guys can figure it out. But as I developed my taste, as I developed my palate, I realized that I could create different types of experiences that previously were inaccessible to me. They were illegible to me because I didn't know how to be sensitive to them. Now, we'll put that on one side. On the other side, if you think about what happens once humans create, let's say, an industry that produces lots of instruments, well, now there's an opportunity for people to pick up and learn how to play these instruments, and then they start to play these instruments together, and then you start to create new genres of music. Why? Because you're able to express these things in ways that economics previously would have inhibited you from doing. So how did that turn into a business? Record labels were created that had a certain taste or perspective on the types of musical experiences that people wanted to have. And so I think software is going to go to the same route, where essentially instead of VCs investing in common use cases across large populations, we'll see a set of music label-like genres that produce software-like experiences that allow for incredibly bespoke and idiosyncratic experiences that you wouldn't otherwise have bothered to put money into. Now, to bring this back around to the mixology thought, it occurred to me that in today's world, it's sort of like if you create an amazing cocktail, you would then create a bar around that one cocktail. That's what SaaS is. Whereas in the future, you start with a concept for a bar or a space or an environment, and then you design the drink menu and the food or everything else that goes into it. And so software will be able to take on those types of experiences in a way that, again, hasn't really been done before. So that's going to require a very different type of execution. Whether those are people who are producers of culture or of taste or bring together a set of ideas that are coherent and resonant and make sense internally. So I think that's kind of how I'm thinking about this playing out, over the next 10 to 15 years.
Along those lines, are there certain types of industries or certain areas within AI product building and development that you're kind of spending more time on? You're tinkering in your head, you're researching, you're talking to. There might be people here in this room who might be in those worlds that might want to connect with you after this conversation.
Yeah, I think what I find is The other problem with being me is like I'm often like very early, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room are very early too. But like I was building conversational AI therapy bots in like 2017 before the LLM. I was working on artificial scarcity before NFTs. It's like these ideas kind of are in culture, and I don't know. It's not that I lose interest, but like I'm kind of like, okay, I figured out like how this could work, and it's interesting. But the technology is not there. We don't have the cryptography, or we don't have the LLM, or whatever it is that unlocks the underlying idea for how this might work. So I guess for me, I'm looking at people that don't think of themselves as software developers or software engineers. I'm thinking about, again, like as someone who, I don't know, let's say is over 21, decides to like get into like mixology because they want to taste things that they've never tasted before, or maybe they remove the alcohol. I don't know, it's not about alcohol. But the point is that you have a perspective that up until now it was not possible for you to pursue, or you thought that there were these like royal gods who were like engineers and they could tell you how to do things the right way or the wrong way. And for people that who don't know better, who are ultimately naive, those are the people that are going to like both change the world and figure out how to use generative AI as a medium, because they're not trapped in the current way of just like building software, hoarding value, and then winning on the spoils of that.
Okay. Well, we have actually some time, and I know we said we were going to do questions, but I thought, you know what, let's open it up. So if you have any questions, I want to do this very democratic and simple. You want to walk right here, and I'm going to give you the mic, so that way we can have, we can get the questions in. Keep in mind, just ask the question. Don't tell your whole life story, because we have a lot of, I want him to answer as many questions as possible. And I really want to take advantage of this guy. This is a very, very smart, multidisciplinary individual who's creating great things. So please take advantage of this. I'm going to be right here. So you have a question? First come, first serve. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ario.
What's up, Ario?
What's up? There was an article flying around, I'll try not to give my life story, about how there was some study done where people using vibe coding tools felt like they were making progress, but when they actually looked into the data, they were like going 19% backwards. This aspect of vibe coding and LLMs is really fascinating to me. I was wondering if you could give your thoughts on sort of how do we get out of that situation and what that might look like.
Yeah, I think this is like super interesting. If you guys haven't seen this story, basically there was like some study that was done on current application of generative AI and LLMs and vibe coding, mostly in enterprises or businesses. And essentially, there was this false sense of progress that developers had because they were just kind of like in flow and just kind of like riffing with the AI. And it turned out that they were like 20% less efficient at getting the same tasks done than if they just fucking done the thing itself. So you have sort of like two questions there. One is, are we just that bad at judging our own progress? The answer is yes. But the second question is it a problem? In other words, could it lead to, I suppose, two things? One, if you're in flow more often, even if you're slower, does that mean you might actually retain longer with a business? One of the hardest things right now is recruiting good people, I think, to companies who stick around, who are working on problems that they find interesting. And so if you actually lower the cognitive overhead, so you're not, whatever, developers are lazy as it is, and I love you as developers, like it's not meant as a negative, then that might actually leave more space for creativity, for discussion with product, or with thinking about product engineering opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise pursue. The second thing is that I feel like even though it's true that looking retrospectively at progress, you would say, oh, well, people are actually not doing that well, like their code sucks, it's problematic. These things are getting so much better every day. Once I started using GPT-5 in Warp to write my extensions, my productivity might be shit anyways, but like it feels like it's gone up, and I can say that I've actually, ChatGPT has like written a lot more code for me, and I'm actually producing a lot more stuff that I feel much better about. So I think it's a mix. I would not have been able to do anything. So essentially my productivity was zero before. So now the fact that I can actually publish things brings me into that environment, and so it's a net add. And that's my point. The point is like idiots like me who have spent the last 20 years wanting to be able to build things, and I couldn't, or I didn't learn the vernacular because my interests are all over the place, now have the ability to actually step into those conversations quite differently than before.
Hi. I think there's a growing realization that with social media, everybody's sort of psychological needs aren't necessarily being met. And that the next killer app, especially with the rise of AI slop, might end up being something that can sort of create micro communities of real meaning, where people have like formed real connections. What are your opinions on what that might look like, and do you think it'll have anything to do with augmented reality?
You said augmented reality?
Yeah.
To the premise and like the sort of baseline of that question, I think we are in the most interesting time when it comes to human culture, human society, human evolution, social evolution. The company that I was building in 2017 was called Molly, and it was a company that was predicated on the idea of helping humans become better versions of themselves so they could actually fight back against the way in which social media was demeaning us. The thought was, or the insight was, that if we could build better humans, what I call the technology of better humans, then social media would actually get better as a result. In other words, social media is downstream of our own behaviors. So essentially, we've created this massive platform to expose all of our traumas and all the poor ways in which we treat each other, and then to amplify it, and then to gamify it, and then to monetize it. And you're like, oh, wow, this is like terrible. Social media sucks. No, we suck, but there's an opportunity for us to improve. So to your question, I don't know whether augmented reality is or is not part of that mix. It is a medium, but I think that this question of having conversational accomplices or friends or buddies or whatever you want to call it, that brings a level of self-reflection without shame or judgment, because it's just electrons, may create, it's going to have multiple different consequences and effects on the next generation. So I would look at the second or third order generations after that, and whether or not these things have actually created less egoism and insecurity and doubt, and more confidence and more, less neuroticism. And if that happens, whether it's augmented reality or whether it's a chip in your head, it doesn't really matter. Our ability to cooperate and to communicate and then to be with each other, I think, would improve naturally.
Kind of a tied question, Chris. You're kind of a polymath, so I think of you like seeing all these different things. Do you think that humanity becomes more creative or even more human, or do we just become more dependent on technology as we approach to AGI? And think about the average person. They're probably not in San Francisco. Love to hear your take.
Wow. It's a great question. I don't like the cop-out answer, which I used to say in some of my talks, where it's like, it's up to us. Because to some degree it is. But I think what I've learned is that that's also a naive way to think about it, because of all of the machinery of capitalism that we exist within. And so my hope and sense is that there is a younger generation and set of people, and it's not about like age per se, I think it's about attitude and perspective, that either decide to, I don't know. The thing that I worry about, it's like hurt people. And what I'm seeing Elon do with like Annie and Grok and these like kind of anime characters, it's like, it's going to be very seductive. And I think I'm going to come around to answering your question, but because, I grew up on Twitter, I was the 1,163rd user of the platform. I was the 19th user of Instagram. I've been on these platforms from the very inception, from the very beginning. And in the beginning, the culture was actually quite good. We were quite open. We were quite vulnerable with each other. And as a result, lots of people also came into that. But then because they weren't from the same culture, they started to abuse or take advantage of it or use it for commercial purposes, which exploited or undermined the integrity of what those platforms were for. So if you look at something like Grok, which from an app perspective is, I don't know, a year or so old, and it already has like pornographic characters as one of like the primary use cases, especially for like young men who are alone and feeling shamed and not quite sure what to do with themselves. That's the start. I mean, Twitter's gotten really bad, but imagine if 20 years ago, that's what Twitter was. So to me, my sense is I don't want to necessarily therapize, Elon Musk, but to the degree that people who are building these products have not gone inward and understand the things that motivate them and why they do certain things, founders are like crazy people in a really positive way when they direct their idiosyncrasies towards positive pro-social outcomes. But if there is something that is broken or traumatic in you, you will amplify that downstream for generations to come. And so I'm worried that people that are using some of these AI tools and products are actually just extenuating the trauma and the unaddressed trauma that some of these people have built. Now, I'm not trying to give you a sermon. I'm just telling you my experience having done the hashtag Like, the things that I did not know or understand about myself and my own failings are built into the way that people use that product. And I've heard for years about how people hate the hashtag, and it's like, even Elon like hates the hashtag. And so I have to take some responsibility for my contribution to the way in which people use it. But at the same time, I came from a place where I was wanting to get more people onto the platform to connect and to find and to see each other. And so I guess like that's what I'm worried about. We are going to bake in a set of personalities into these technologies if we are not mindful of the idiosyncrasies of the people who are building them.
Well, unfortunately, we have to end at this note, but hopefully you can stay around to talk to some people. So you guys can still please talk to. Let's give it up to Chris. Wow, what a talk.
Thank you.
What a way to end the talk, too, about the way the future is. Seriously, brother, thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Chris and Ash.